Good morning and welcome to Radio Free Eskippakithiki. And that was Walrus with their song DCS. They will be playing at the, they're playing on March 17th at Cosmic Charlie's. I guess that's a week from today, right? It's the 10th? Huh. Oh, that means Mercury goes out of retrograde today. I know that's what everybody was waiting for. Anyway, so next week, when Mercury is also not in retrograde, you can go see them at Cosmic Charlie's. The doors open at 7 p.m. And I assume they have many other songs that sound like that. Okay, we're going to play 4 more songs from the playbox, and then we're probably going to read you the 1871 Ku Klux Klan Act and see how that goes. So, welcome to the show.
Oh, I hear.
Yeah, I hear it's going to carry us out to sea. Sounds pleasant, to be honest, but, you know, what do I know? I'm on a modern folk band. So, that was the Motahari Brigade with their song The Flood off of their album Power From Below. And the DJs told us that we would enjoy it if we also enjoyed Bernie Sanders. They were wrong. Before that was Khruangbin and Leon Bridges with their song Texas Sun, which was about the Texas sun. Before that was Michael Doucet with his song Water, Water, which was also about water and water. Boy, we really have very object-oriented songs so far today. Before that was HTRK with Give It Up. That was all right. Soul Asylum with Long Day. That was not all right. Sorry, that was not all right. Soul Asylum, not every song is good by Soul Asylum. And before that was Walrus with their song DCS off of their album Seriously, and you should go see them at Cosmic Charlie's in exactly 1 week and 14 hours. I bet they're going to be awesome. So, this is Radio Free Eskippakithiki, and we are here in Lexington, 88.1 WRFL, all the way to the left. I guess I'm going to turn this mic up a little bit. Let's see how that works. Yeah. Anyway, and a lot's happened since the last week. Which one? Which was it? That one that went too high? I'm way too close to it. This is an experiment. This is always in process. So a whole lot has happened in the last week. First off, a sincere goodbye to our friend Jake Gibbs, who passed away just a few days ago, suddenly and unexpectedly.
Yeah, that was sad. That
was really sad. That was definitely Lexington's loss right there. And also another major figure who died during the last week was McCoy Tyner, the famous jazz piano player who I actually went to see play live several times, and who was an amazingly good piano player. So let's play one of his songs as a sort of dedication to Jake Gibbs. Here's Blue Piano from McCoy Tyner's 44th Street Suite. All right, well, that was McCoy Tyner with his song Blue Piano, which he claims was a Duke Ellington cover, but I've listened to a lot of Duke Ellington. I don't think I've heard that one. In any case, so, Mr. Young, I would like to read into the record the Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871. Does that sound interesting?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, I got your levels way up and mine way down. Let's try this more normally.
There we go.
All right, so the Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871 from the 42nd United States Congress. Yes, I am literally going to read the entire act over the air. So if you're trying to get back to sleep, this will probably help, and if not, hey, listen along. Okay, 42nd United States Congress, the first session, an act to enforce the provisions of the 14th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States and for other purposes. And of course, we'll be commenting along as we go.
Right, so the 14th Amendment said former slaves are now no longer slaves and have to be treated like regular human beings.
Unless they're in prison.
Unless they're prisoners,
that part was very carefully in there. Oh, well, now you mentioned that, I have to play a song, because there's a song that relates directly to the 14th Amendment, a really good song. Well, I am actually going to read the entire Ku Klux Klan Act into this. I will not be dissuaded on this, but we are during Safe Harbor right now, which means that we can play songs with bad words in them. So actually, I should play this song now while we still have the chance. Jeff, I'd like you to listen to this song. This song is by Killer Mike, who you may know as a Bernie Sanders surrogate.
Huh.
He was a huge Bernie Sanders supporter in 2016, and he's a huge Bernie Sanders supporter this year. Anyway, this is his song called Reagan. Why, yes, Ronald Reagan was a monster, and it is before 6 o'clock, so we can use bad words about it if we want to. Anyway, this is 88.1 WRFL. You can feel free to call us at 859-257 WRFL, which is 9735 according to my calculations. So yeah, I accept Killer Mike's correction. I was thinking of the 13th Amendment, which says, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or at any place subject to their jurisdiction. Well, our massively oversized prison population manages to get us around that pretty easily. And they are sending prisoners out. Now that we've driven so many migrants and illegal workers out of the nation, we are actually sending prisoners out to work in the fields now. That's becoming a thing. Prison labor is very big right now. From sorting recycling. You know, your recycling doesn't just magically go away when you drop it in the recycling bin. The prisoner gets to sort it for you. Cleaning up around the streets, manufacturing, and now getting into the fields. So yeah, literally enslaved for the fields. But the 14th Amendment, which is the Ku Klux Klan of 1871, is this: all persons born or naturalized in the United States are subject to the jurisdiction thereof, are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States. Nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws.
That's really broad.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and they had problems getting people to go along with it from the very beginning.
Yeah. So this Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871 is sort of the basis for all civil rights law today.
Yeah, it very much seems that way. It's... with my cursory research, large parts of this law are still very much in effect, and very little of it appears to have been overridden in any way. Wikipedia is vague on what is and is not in operation, and of course, you have your own work with it, and there's that St. Louis prosecutor who's suing her own police department under the Ku Klux Klan Act right now. But here is the Ku Klux Klan Act, so decide for yourself. Be it enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America in Congress assembled, that any person who, under color of any law, statute, ordinance, regulation, custom, or usage of any state, shall subject or cause to be subjected any person within the jurisdiction of the United States to the deprivation of any rights, privileges, or immunities secured by the Constitution of the United States, shall any such law, statute, ordinance, regulation, custom, or usage of the state to the contrary notwithstanding, be liable to the party injured in any action at law, suit in equity, or any other proper proceedings for redress, such proceeding to be prosecuted in the several district or circuit courts of the United States, with and subject to the same rights of appeal, review upon error, and other remedies provided in like cases in such courts, under the provisions of the Act of 9th of April, 1866, entitled, An Act to Protect All Persons in the United States and Their Civil Rights, and to Furnish the Means of Their Vindication, and the other remedial laws of the United States, which are in their nature applicable in such cases. So I don't think there's any problem with translating as we go along, right? What that's saying is...
Yeah, right.
Go through first. A person who, under color of any law... Now, what's under color of any law mean?
Well, it's basically saying, well, the law says this, so I can do it to you. Mm-hmm. The official definition here of color of law is the semblance of legal right, the pretense or appearance of right. So any action done under color of law adjusts the law to the circumstances, even if the action is against the law.
Yeah.
So if somebody says, well, I don't want you here in my building, you have to leave or I'm going to call the police and have you arrested for trespassing.
Yeah.
So
well, that's okay. So if
they're acting under color of law
because they're taking on authority, they're assuming authority. They're assuming a legal
they're
authority.
referring to the authority, and they're actually referring to a law, the trespassing law of Kentucky.
So to pick a random example like this, this police officer, the undercover police officer in New York City this week, who detained and tased and arrested that young man. I don't know if you've seen this, but anybody who's listening to this probably has. It's a really big deal right now. The police officer refused to identify himself and was physically abusive to the man without identifying himself as a police officer. The man in question figured out he was a police officer from the way he was acting, but the guy wouldn't identify himself. So he was, the plainclothes police officer was behaving under the color of law, even though what he was doing was completely illegal.
That's a perfect example. He was acting under color of law.
So this law refers to people who are taking on the semblance of authority, whether they deserve it or not. So,
whether they're an elected official or an appointed official or just a person who is trying to do something that they claim is legal.
So let's say if I'm at the library, which is a public space, and I'm just me, and I decide that I don't like somebody in the library, and I start yelling at them, "Get out of the library," that's just rude. But if I say, "Get out of the library or I'm going to call the cops," that's an edge case. Now, if I say, "I'm a cop, I'm an attorney, you have to get out of the library right now," that's no longer an edge case at all, right? That's absolutely acting under the color of law.
Yeah, right.
And that's what I'm doing. Okay, so anybody who, under the color of law, subjects or causes to be subjected any person within the United States to the deprivation of any rights, privileges, or immunities. And, of course, there's a lot of legalese here. They've got to be very clear. So,
well, the Bill of Rights.
Yeah.
Basically, it's a statute here that says, if you violate my rights, I can sue you.
Mm-hmm. Well, we'll get to what the manner of redress is in a second.
Okay.
I'm looking forward to that. I think there's 7 sections of this, and I just read section 1.
All right.
But yeah, so right now we're very clear. The Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871 makes it extremely illegal to act under color of law to remove anybody else's civil rights.
Or property or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Now, section 2, that if 2 or more persons within any state or territory of the United States shall conspire together to overthrow or to put down or to destroy by force the government of the United States, or to levy war against the United States, or to oppose by force the authority of the government of the United States, or by force, intimidation, or threat to prevent, hinder, or delay the execution of any law of the United States, or by force to seize, take, or possess any property of the United States contrary to the authority thereof, or by force, intimidation, or threat to prevent any person from accepting or holding any office or trust or place of confidence under the United States, or from discharging the duties thereof, or by force, intimidation, or threat to induce any officer of the United States to leave any state, district, or place where his duties as such officer might lawfully be performed, or to injure him in his person or property on account of his, it should be his or her, actually these days it would be there, on account of his lawful discharge of the duties of his office, or to injure his property so as to molest, interrupt, hinder, or impede him in the discharge of his official duty, or by force, intimidation, or threat to deter any party or witness in any court of the United States from attending such court, or from testifying in any matter pending, or from testifying in any matter pending in such court, fully, freely, and truthfully, or to injure any such party or witness in his person or property on account of his having so attended or testified, or by force, intimidation, or threat to influence the verdict, presentment, or indictment of any juror or grand juror in any court of the United States, or to injure such juror in his person or property on account of any verdict, presentment, or indictment lawfully assented to him by him, or on account of his being or having been such juror. This is an expansive bill, but I mean it's not like a.
That was all one sentence, right?
Oh yeah. No, we're still in the middle of the sentence here. But I think the word here is comprehensive.
Yeah.
They're being very clear. They probably could have broken this up into a few bills, but one gets the sense that they were dealing with a certain set of behaviors.
That's right.
That they wanted to
That's
shut
right.
down.
That's where a lot of laws and bylaws come from.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody does something, well, there ought to be a law against that.
Yeah.
And so that's the kind of thing that results.
And yeah, they come up with a very comprehensive law. And I mean, basically anything in this over the past 150 years, literally. This bill's 149 years old. Right? Yeah, 149 years old. Anyway, so most everything in this bill has already been codified into other bills, but as we will find when we get a little bit further in, it's all still there. This is the foundation I think you're right. This is a foundation of a huge part of civil rights law. If any lawyers happen to be listening to us at 5 a.m, please feel free to call in. Okay, so let's continue. Here's what else you can't do. So no threatening jurors. That's fair.
Right.
I like that. Okay, we should get back to what a conspiracy is in a second here. Or to injure such a juror in his person or property, or on account of any verdict, presentiment, or indictment lawfully assented to by him, or on account of his being or having been such a juror, or shall conspire together, because this is a conspiracy statute, or go in disguise upon the public highway or upon the premises of another for the purpose. Well, that's very obviously pointed at the KKK.
Yeah.
What that means in the modern world is interesting because going in disguise is taken a very different form in the modern world. You know, people use internet disguises casually. I mean, what's a disguise on the internet? Whereas these guys were obviously referring to idiots who put bed sheets on their head and rode around on horses.
Yep.
Okay, so you can't go on somebody else's property to intimidate them for being a juror. That's in there too. And you also can't go on the road in disguise for the purposes of going to another person's property for intimidating them for being a juror. That is awfully specific, but it's right in here. Either directly or indirectly, of depriving any person or any class of persons of the equal protection of laws, or of equal privileges or immunities under laws, or for the purpose of preventing or hindering the constituted authorities of any state from giving or securing to all persons within such a state the equal protection of the laws, or shall conspire together for the purpose of, in any manner, impeding, hindering, obstructing, or defeating the due course of justice in any state or territory, with intent to deny any citizen of the United States the due and equal protection of the laws, or to injure any person in his person or property, or for lawfully enforcing the right of any person or class of persons to the equal protection of the laws, or by force, intimidation, or threat to prevent any citizen of the United States lawfully entitled to vote from giving his support or advocacy in a lawful manner towards or in favor of the election of any lawfully qualified person as an elector of President or Vice President of the United States, or as a member of the Congress of the United States, or to injure any such person in his or property on account of such support or advocacy, each and every person so offending shall be deemed guilty of a high crime, and upon conviction thereof in any district or circuit court of the United States, or district or supreme court of any territory of the United States having jurisdiction over similar offenses, shall be punished by a fine not less than $500 nor more than $5,000, or by imprisonment, with or without hard labor, as the court may determine, for a period of not less than 6 months nor more than 6 years, as the court may determine, or by both such fine and imprisonment as the court shall determine. That was one sentence.
One sentence. All right, so the first section you read had to do with civil law.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody violates your rights. The Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871 says you can sue them.
Yeah.
Second sentence there is about the criminal part of the law, where you can be prosecuted basically for committing racist acts or prejudiced acts against a group of people.
That's clearly what was meant. Oh, sorry. Please continue.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, that's clearly what was meant, but this is a case where, I mean, what is still the law? What was the law? What is the law now? Because this, as it's written, is not just broad, it's global. It's encyclopedic.
Yeah. So, I mean, later this act was divided into two, the civil part and the criminal part.
Mm-hmm. And this is the criminal part.
Well, the second, that huge sentence you read was the criminal.
Yeah. Well, okay, so, because they're trying to be very clear. But, okay, first off, this is a conspiracy statute.
Right. Conspiracy against rights is what it's called.
And the libertarian in me does not like conspiracy and conspiracy statutes because they're hard to prove and because they are injurious to the First Amendment.
I would think libertarians would like a statute that makes it illegal to conspire against somebody's rights. Libertarians are all about individual rights, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, and protection of contract law. But this. I mean, for example, this would make it all the Texas separatists would be in a lot of trouble under this because they are conspiring together, 2 or more persons in a territory or state. That's Texas. Texas has been a state since 1849.
Okay.
To conspire together to overthrow or to put down or to destroy by force the government of the United States, or to oppose by force the authority of the government of the United States. So, they that's what they're doing. If you're talking about Second Amendment solutions to the government and stuff like that, you're pretty much directly treading on this.
I think you have to act on it.
No, just says conspire.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
you can be sitting in your home,
You could be writing somebody on the internet.
or a coffee shop, and saying, we really ought to take up arms against the state government of Texas.
Yeah.
And that's what you're saying?
Go in disguise upon the public highway or upon the premises of another for the purpose. That's the internet. The internet, even if the internet is not a public highway, it's definitely upon the premises of another.
Information superhighway.
Yeah, well, is that a technical term? So, but I mean, if I type the words on my phone and they appear on your phone in your house, so
Right. Well, and I think people have been prosecuted for things that they have written on social media.
yes, they have. I'd be much better at thinking of a case right now. There was a guy recently who was very angry at his ex-wife and kept writing hip hop songs where the lyrics were all about terrible things he was going to do to a woman who just happened to have the same name as his ex-wife, and his defense was that he was in character. He was rapping in character, and it just so happened that his character had the same name as him. And the person that he was rapping about hurting had the same name as his ex-wife.
What happened to him?
I could look that up real fast because I don't recall. I think that the court said it's legal.
Oh,
Which should it be?
didn't even say, well, you shouldn't do that in the future.
Yeah, I think there was part of that too.
Oh, okay.
Well, I don't know. I can play a song real fast while I look it up. Let me finish up section 2, and then let's look that up. Okay, so we got through, and honestly, these penalties, even though they're 150 years old, they make a lot of sense to me because I don't like bills that have, or I don't like criminal penalties that have money attached to them, because that's saying if you're rich, it's not a crime. It really is. Like traffic tickets and stuff like that. If you have enough money to pay your traffic ticket, you can speed all you want to. Doesn't matter.
I guess so.
It's like,
Well, eventually you'll get enough points.
Yeah.
So they'll take your license.
Which is why they put that in. And I think that's right. And before that, it was horrifically abused. There were, especially in rich areas, there were people who would drive terribly for years. But America used to be much more accepting of traffic fatalities than it is today. Especially during the drunk driving era of the 70s.
Yep.
But anyway, so $500 to $5,000 for conspiracy. I don't know. I mean, how do we find out what part of this is still the law?
Well, technically, it's all still on the books.
Yeah. Well.
And it's been, as I say, it's been split into 2 statutes, federal statutes, civil and criminal.
Now, since Section 1 says that it has to be under the color of law, does that mean that Section 2, when they're saying 2 people have to conspire together, do they have to be conspiring together under the color of law?
I don't know. I didn't catch every word.
Well, okay. No, I mean, so Section 1 says that any person who, under color of any law, statute, ordinance, regulation, custom, or usage of any state. So
you could have a state where it's customary to go riding at night with sheets on your head, and that's a custom here. I mean,
you're absolutely right. I mean, if you were in Inquisition era Spain, they'd be like, Ku Klux what? No, we're hunting witches.
Right.
Silly Americanos.
And it's all legal, of course, because the church said so.
Well, so, I mean, now I don't know whether the conspiracy in the Section 2 has to be under color of law.
Probably.
I would hope so.
But that's pretty broad.
Yeah, well.
As we've just discussed.
It's not just broad. I mean, to me, broad is a poorly written statute, or just a statute that says something like, like all cats are gray or something like that. That's a broad statute. This is a lending library. I'm not even done with it yet. Okay, sentence 2. Section 2, sentence 2.
Oh.
And if any one or more persons engaged in any such conspiracy shall do, or cause to be done, any act in furtherance of the object of such conspiracy, whereby any person shall be injured in his person or property, or deprived of having and exercising any right or privilege of a citizen of the United States, the person so injured or deprived of such rights and privileges may have and maintain an action for the recovery of damages occasioned by such injury or deprivation of rights and privileges against any one or more of the persons engaged in such conspiracy, such action to be prosecuted in the proper district or circuit court of the United States, with and subject to the same rights of appeal, review upon error, and other remedies provided in like cases in such courts under the provisions of the Act of April 9th, 1866, entitled An Act to Protect All Persons in the United States and Their Civil Rights, and to Furnish the Means of Their Vindication. So this means that if two people do this, you can sue.
Right.
But not if one person does it.
Okay.
So if one guy shows up on your yard, in your front yard with a bed sheet on, you can't, it's not a conspiracy.
I guess not.
But if two people talk about it and don't show up, it is a conspiracy.
Well, the real life examples are usually pretty clear.
Yeah. Well, they should be, but I mean, that's the thing is, like, laws are usually used by the powerful against the poor.
That's true too. This seems to be an exception.
Well, I mean, is it in its use? I guess we'll find out when we get to the Wikipedia page where they explain exactly what parts of this are still working, or how it's still working in this day. Because as far as I can tell, this is still the law. But I mean, we see this all the time where things are in the Constitution or they're very clearly written, and they're still ignored.
Right.
So, I mean, the law is about the exercise of power more than it is about some sort of abstract quantification of the world.
The law is an attempt to make things fair.
Yeah.
And the attempt often fails.
Yeah. All right. Well, Section 3. That in all cases where insurrection, domestic violence, unlawful combinations, or conspiracies in any state shall so obstruct or hinder the execution or laws thereof, and of the United States so as to deprive any portion or class of the people of such state of any of the rights, privileges, or immunities or protection named in the Constitution secured by this act, and the constituted authorities of such state shall either be unable to protect or shall from any cause fail in or reuse protection of the people in such rights. Such facts shall be deemed a denial by such state of the equal protection of the laws to which they are entitled under the Constitution of the United States. And in all such cases, or whenever any such insurrection, violence, unlawful combination, or conspiracy shall oppose or obstruct the laws of the United States, or the due course of justice under the same, it shall be lawful for the President, and it shall be his duty to take such measures, by the employment of the militia or the land and naval forces of the United States, or of either, or by other means, as he may deem necessary for the suppression of such insurrection, domestic violence, or combinations, and any person who shall be arrested under the provisions of this and the preceding section shall be delivered to the marshal of the proper district to be dealt with according to law. Now,
that gives the president the right to send the National Guard.
Yeah, and I don't trust the president.
To either enforce the Bill of Rights or to put down what the president may feel is an insurrection or rebellion.
Yeah, like Blue Tarp Man and the Malheur Preserve, the guys who took over the Malheur Preserve when Obama was president, 2015? Remember the people who, the Bundys.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the Bundys.
Yeah.
But no, the reason that I'm reading this today is because I'm concerned about election fraud. And
all right.
The right to free elections is...
They surely talked about elections and voters.
Yeah, it sure does. It sure does. But this is... So, even though I don't trust this president at all, any of the rights, privileges, or immunities named in the Constitution secured by this act, one of the major rights and privileges named in the Constitution and secured by this act is the right to vote and the right to choose your representatives.
Right.
And as we've discussed, and the next time that we get to be really boring, I'd like to read Citizens United. But the free speech of your elected officials is your free speech, right? Your representative in a representative government is speaking for you. He's your representative.
In theory.
He or she. Well, actually, Tulsi Gabbard's the perfect example here. Tulsi Gabbard is an elector. Tulsi Gabbard has electors, right? Because of American Samoa last week. Thank you, American Samoa, if you're listening.
Yeah, she has a delegate.
Yeah.
Or two.
She has 2 delegates.
Okay.
So when Tulsi Gabbard speaks in her official capacity as a candidate, which is a little bit blurry, you know, obviously when she gets up in the morning, she's not talking as a candidate, and when she's talking into a microphone, she is talking as a candidate. But, that was an interesting sound. I like that. I'll remember that one. Anyway, so when she's talking as a candidate, she is talking for the people of American Samoa and a few other people around America. But everybody who chooses to vote for her or chooses to have the option to vote for her, she is speaking in the legal sense with their voice. So when the DNC is the DNC under the color of law is an interesting question.
Well, I have an opinion on that.
Please do, sir.
The 2 major political parties get public money to administer elections, both primary and general. You've got all these poll workers.
Yep.
And they get paid by the state to sit there and make sure that you're a registered voter in that district, and the parties staff that.
Yep.
And the parties have every obligation to make sure that the elections are fair. If a poll official sees something illegal going on, they are obligated to report it and try to stop the activity. So during an election, and one could say during the campaign leading up to an election, both political parties are acting as agents of the state.
Yeah, at least as much as, say, a private prison or a private DMV, right? Even though they're staffing things themselves and they're taking care of all management decisions internally, they are still responsible they're taking the state's money, they're taking our money, and they're still responsible to the state.
They still have to administer that prison according to law.
Absolutely.
They can't, whip the prisoners.
No, they have to feed them, all this stuff. So
right.
So the Democratic and the Republican Party should at least have this responsibility.
They do.
Yeah, they at least have this level of responsibility. So, yeah, so you can absolutely say that the DNC would deny that they're acting under the color of law because they claim the dodge is that the primaries aren't elections. Right.
Well, tell that to any voter who goes to if you go in to vote at your polling place in a primary, it feels exactly the same as when you go in November.
You go and vote with your voter registration card.
Everything is the same.
Yeah, and you're voting on nonpartisan. You're voting on binding nonpartisan seats at the same time. There's all sorts of votes that are mixed up on the ballot. So the idea that there's like this...
The idea that the primary is not an election came in Kentucky, was first raised in about the year 1902, when some court noticed that, the Kentucky Constitution at that time had a provision that said there can't be 2 judicial elections in the same district in the same year. And so...
Wait, hold on. So there can't be 2 judicial elections in the same district.
And so if you had a primary in May and a general election
Oh.
in November. That's 2 elections, and the Constitution said you can't do that. So the stupid court said, instead of saying, well, the Constitution needs to be tweaked a little bit, they said a primary is not an election, so it's all okay.
Oh, that's ludicrous.
That's how they solved that problem, and it's stupid.
Yeah, no, that's terrible.
And that got onto the Kentucky law books, and then in 1954, the Kentucky Supreme Court, there was a case in Louisville where the Republican Party, which was actually the less racist party at that in 1954, Republicans were kind of for civil rights at that time.
Yeah.
And the Democrats
In a lot
were,
of ways, they still are. I mean, I shouldn't qualify that. They absolutely still are. There's more black elected officials on the state level than there are Republican than Democrat. You know, it's.
Well, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
But okay, so in 1954, the Supreme Court said, back this 1900 case or 1904 said primary's not an election, and they said that the Republican Party of Louisville Jefferson County did not have to follow its bylaws. They could essentially decide who their nominee was going to be for some office. They could trample their own bylaws, and that's where that doctrine originated in Kentucky. That primary elections do not have to be free and fair, as Section 6 of the Kentucky Constitution requires. Because in 1900, somebody said, it's not really an election. So it doesn't have to be free and fair.
So, sorry.
In 1954, the Kentucky, the highest court, it was the Court of Appeals at that time. There were only 2 levels. Now there are 3. There was no Kentucky Supreme Court. So the highest court in 1954 said, political parties can do whatever they want.
And out of curiosity, did this spread from America to from Kentucky to the rest of America,
I doubt it.
Was it an independent discovery? Because
it sounds like an idiosyncratic.
Yeah, I mean that's
little thing that
that's
happened.
what the DNC declared after 2016 was that since primaries are not technically elections, they can do anything they want to. They can.
Well, they said we're a private organization, and we can rig it if we want.
So is a primary technically an election in other states?
I don't know if other states had decisions like the 1904 one and the 1954 one here in Kentucky. I don't know.
Yeah, it's an interesting question.
But basically, the idea that political parties are private organizations and can violate any law they want, including their own bylaws, is simply false. Legally, it's false.
Well, I want to get to that in a second, but
All right.
one thing I want to mention is I'm fascinated by cultural technology. Like, here's an example. Do you know what a foxhole is, right? Everybody knows what a foxhole is.
Yeah, they say there are no atheists in them.
Have they checked? I mean, anyway. So, you know who invented foxholes?
Who?
The Tonkawa Indians.
Oh.
The Tonkawa Indians who lived around Austin, Texas, they dug these things called rifle pits. And nobody had ever heard of that before.
Yeah.
Nobody ever thought about digging a tiny little hole to sit in while you shoot at people. And
Very clever.
It spread from there. And it actually was one of the major technologies of the Civil War was digging a tiny hole to sit in while you shot at people with a gun. Nobody thought of that. They thought of that, and it spread from there. It's the same thing with hammocks. Hammocks were invented or they were discovered, whatever. They were popularized by the Carib Indians.
Oh.
Do you know what sailors slept on before they slept in hammocks?
Bunks.
The ground. They slept on the floor of they either slept on the floor of the ship or they would sleep on their chest. Their sea chests.
Oh.
They would sleep curled up in a ball on their sea chests.
Huh.
Was it comfortable? No. It was incredibly uncomfortable. So, I mean, and people were very short in those days and had bad backs. It was really hard on their bodies to be sleeping on a chest. But the Carib Indians thought, hey, why don't we just sleep in a bag? So, like we've mentioned with mutually assured destruction. Mutually assured destruction was a Russian invention. that shaped the world that we're in today. Even though it's just a set of words or a set of concepts, it was an invention. It didn't exist before. It did exist then. So there is progress. There is change in the world. Yeah, every bit as much as a recipe. And, we have no problem saying whatsoever there was no such thing as beer cheese or no such thing as a hot brown until Kentucky invented these ridiculous cheese-laden contraptions. There's no such thing as Ale 8 until somebody made an Ale 8.
There you go.
It is very possible that there was no such thing as saying, I don't know, I guess a primary is not technically an election until these people invented it.
Kentucky might have blazed that trail in 1900.
I'd like to know.
I don't know.
Well, the possibilities out there, and it fascinates me. Okay, so if we want to fix for this, like I'm sitting here listening to this and I'm thinking, okay, what if we just pass a bill in the Kentucky State Legislature that says primaries are elections?
Well, they did.
They did?
Yeah, they did. I'm trying to remember when, probably in the 70s.
They passed a bill
They passed a law that said that anything that's a crime in a general election is an equal crime in a primary. So the General Assembly did its job.
Yeah.
It fixed this stupid loophole that had existed since 1954 or 1900, and they made primaries precisely equal to a general election.
And this is still going on.
And yet the courts of Kentucky today still refer back to Republican Party of Louisville, Jefferson County case in 1954. They still say, this case said that primaries aren't elections, and parties can violate their own bylaws, so it must still be true. But even though the General Assembly fixed it, judges don't care.
Oh, God.
They go back to the old one.
Do you happen to know
before it was fixed?
Do you happen to know the name of the bill or how to find the bill that from the 70s?
Yeah, KRS 119 something.
This is why I hang out with Geoff Young. Okay, we'll look that up and read that because that's absolutely interesting. Hold on a second. I'm just going to type it in before I forget. Or would you like to take over reading section 3 while I type that in? There you are. KRS 119, you said, right? And we're on section 3.
Beginning of that?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Fascinating radio.
That, in all cases where insurrection, domestic violence, unlawful combinations, or conspiracies in any state shall so obstruct or hinder the execution of the laws thereof and of the United States as to deprive any portion or class of the people of such state of any of the rights, privileges, immunities, or protection named in the Constitution and secured by this act, and the constituted authorities of such state shall be unable to protect or shall fail or reuse protection of the people in such rights, such facts shall be deemed a denial. I think you read this. This sounds...
Actually, no, you read it, but I'm understanding it better now that you say it this way. I mean, that's the nature of learning, is getting things in enough different ways and enough different voices that you get. Okay, so that was what we were saying is like... So technically, what I was getting at with that was that since the Iowa Democratic Caucus completely failed, Trump could technically send in the National Guard, under Section 3.
Oh, well, I never thought of that.
I mean... If you're listening, Donald Trump, I hope you don't. But that's what it says.
Yeah, that would just muddy the waters even more.
Oh, my God.
It's hard to imagine, but National Guard has halted the Iowa caucus.
Yeah. No, I would hope it would be the Iowa National Guard that he used. No, you can deploy the National Guard anywhere within the United States,
That's right.
but not without. That's something that we need to get to one of these days. But Mr. Young and I feel very strongly that the National Guard should never be deployed outside of America's borders. So, Section 4. We've established that it's got to be the president, according to this. I hope they fixed that part, because I don't think it should just be the president.
Well, I think the president can delegate that. But anyway, go on.
Yeah. Okay. Section 4. That whenever in any state, this is fun. Section 4, I feel like I'm reading something into the congressional record, like it will matter, and that judges will suddenly start following KRS 119 because I read it into the radio at 6:12 in the morning.
WRFL said so.
Yeah. What greater authority? Section 4. That whenever in any state or part of a state the unlawful combinations named in the preceding section of this act shall be organized and armed, and so numerous and powerful as to be able by violence to either overthrow or set at defiance the constituted authorities of such state, and of the United States within such state, or when the constituted authorities are in complicity with, or shall connive at the unlawful purposes of such powerful and armed combinations, and whenever by reason of either or all of the causes aforesaid, the conviction of such offenders, and the preservation of the public safety shall become in such district impracticable. In every such case, such combinations shall be deemed a rebellion against the government of the United States, and during the continuance of such rebellion, and within the limits of the district which shall be so under the sway thereof, such limits to be prescribed by proclamation, it shall be lawful the President of the United States, when in his judgment the public safety shall require it, to suspend the privileges of the writ of habeas corpus, to the end that such rebellion may be overthrown, provided that all the provisions of the second section of an act entitled An Act Relating to Habeas Corpus and regulating judicial proceedings in certain cases approved March 3rd, 1863, which relate to the discharge of prisoners other than prisoners of war, and to the penalty for refusing to obey the order of the court shall be in full force so far as the same are applicable to the provisions of this section. Provided further that the President shall first have made proclamation, as now provided by law, commanding such insurgents to disperse, and provided also that the provisions of this section shall not be in force after the end of the next regular session of Congress. Well, that section started bad, but it got good. I mean, that's the anti-Civil War section. Like, that's...
Anti-rebellion.
Yeah, and which was a major loophole. They didn't really have that before.
Okay.
But it's referring directly to the Act Relating to Habeas Corpus of 1863, which was a bill so bad that people are still angry about it today. That was when they suspended habeas corpus during the Civil War. That's when,
right.
And that has a particularly bad history here in Kentucky, because this is one of the places where they had the most political prisoners.
Oh.
And they harried I think it was it either the Courier or the Journal? They made a big political show trial out of arresting the editor of I want to say the Journal, the Louisville Journal. Anyway, this was a huge deal at the time. So, but it says right here, the president first has to make the proclamation. So basically, the president has to proclaim a limited area to be in open, violent rebellion, armed rebellion.
Right.
And that the provisions of this section shall not be enforced after the end of the next regular session of Congress. I like that a lot, because it means that you don't get an unlimited blank check to just declare parts of American rebellion and send in the National Guard. You have it until you have exactly one session of Congress. I'm a big fan of sundown provisions in general, and definitely having a sundown provision on top of, honestly, this is what's it called, military, not a coup, but what's it called when the military takes over? A police state, yeah. This is a police state. So anyway, they can impose a police state, but only for one session of Congress, and it has to be renewed at every session of Congress. And I do like that. Okay, Section 5. That no person shall be a grand or petit juror in any court of the United States upon any inquiry, hearing, or trial of any suit, proceeding, or prosecution based upon or arising under the provisions of this act, who shall, in the judgment of this court, be in complicity with any such combination or conspiracy. So basically, you can't report for jury duty if you can't be on a jury of any kind.
Yeah, you can be struck from the jury pool if you're part of the Ku Klux Klan.
Now that's a lot more abstract today than it was then, but I still think that's an interesting provision. And every such juror shall, before entering upon any such inquiry, hearing, or trial, take and subscribe an oath in open court that he has never, directly or indirectly, counseled, advised, or voluntarily aided any such combination or conspiracy. And each and every person who shall take this oath and share it and shall therein swear falsely shall be guilty of perjury, and shall be subject to the pains and penalties declared against that crime. And the first section of the act, entitled An Act Defining Additional Causes of Challenge and Prescribing an Additional Oath for Grand and Petty Jurors in the United States, approved June 17th, 1862 B, and the same is hereby repealed. So is this the foundation of the idea of being sworn in court?
I guess so.
That does sound a lot like the language of being sworn in the court. Oaths were a very big deal.
Right.
Back then.
There are probably oaths before that.
Well, it goes back to what, the functioning of the economy and American life in the 19th century. But people used to make an enormous deal out of living by their word and dying by their word. And it's like, I said I'd do it, so I'd do it. Well, I told Jimmy that I'd bury him up in North Dakota, so I'm taking his body to North Dakota. That kind of stuff. Like, my word is my bond, which is the only way that their largely imaginary economy could work. Like, people complain now about our economy being imaginary, but it's nothing compared to how transparent the economy was in the 19th century, because a huge part of the economy was gambling debts.
Oh.
Seriously, like, gambling was a central part of the economy. So the idea that, like, if I say I'm going to pay you $10 because you beat me a hand of poker, I'm going to pay you $10 was absolutely critical to function of society as they knew it. Internal integrity was a fetish, I guess is the word.
Yeah, well, and what about duels?
Yeah. Well, this was during... What is a duel? A duel is a two-person circular firing squad.
Yeah.
Mr. Biden, if you're listening. It's not a circular firing squad when there's just two people. That's a duel. But this was still during the era. It was the end of duel culture.
Okay.
Duel culture was part of the South. Was a huge thing in the South until after the Civil War.
All right.
And probably still was at this time. So, yeah. All right. So, moving on. Section 6. That any person or persons having knowledge that any of the wrongs conspired to be done and mentioned in the second section of this act are about to be committed, and having power to prevent or aid in preventing the same, shall neglect or refuse to do so, and such wrongful act shall be committed, such person or persons shall be liable to person injured, or his legal representatives, for all damages caused by any such wrongful act, which such first-named person or persons, by reasonable diligence, could have prevented. And so, wow. So just knowing that you can sue somebody for just knowing that somebody else was going to do this.
If they don't do anything about it.
Yeah. And such damages may be recovered in an action on the case in the proper circuit court of the United States, and any number of persons guilty of such wrongful neglect or refusal may be joined as defendants in such action. Wow.
Well, provisions like that I kind of think of as a way of saying we're really serious about this.
Yeah. Yeah, America's very high standard of proof is actually the only defense against something like this, because, like, you could really, if you wanted to be extremely ungenerous with this, you could just say, like, you shared a Don't Tread on Me flag on Facebook. That means you knew. I mean, I'm sure that the government, I'm sure that nobody would ever take things to such ridiculous extents.
Well, yeah, and I guess that's why we have a jury system.
Yeah.
To say, oh, well, that's outlandish, case dismissed.
Wow, but on the other hand, if anybody on that jury ever shared any of those memes, they are also in trouble. What?
Yeah, right.
What happens to conspiracy? What happens to 19th century conspiracy laws under 21st century information technology? That's a fascinating question.
It is a good question.
I don't think anybody's answered it. Maybe they have, but okay. Anyway, provided that such action shall be commenced within 1 year after such cause of action shall have accrued. And if the death of any person shall be caused by any such wrongful act and neglect, the legal representative of such deceased person shall have such that action therefore, and may recover not exceeding $5,000 damages therein, for the benefit of the widow of such deceased person, and if any there be, or if there be no widow, for the benefit of the next kin of such a deceased person. Okay, first off, this is because they were dealing with the Ku Klux Klan in their earliest incarnation, and the Ku Klux Klan in their earliest incarnation were scary. Were really, really scary, dangerous,
well, I mean, they didn't stop lynching people.
No.
Till the 20th century.
No. Well, I mean, like, we're talking about, when you're talking about the early Ku Klux Klan, you're talking about Civil War veterans.
Yeah.
Who were extremely trained in violence from horseback.
Right.
The early Ku Klux Klan communicated by whistles. They would ride into town, and they would ride into town with their sheets on and their torches, and they would come in a herd, in a crowd, and they were silent. They wouldn't say anything to each other, and they would actually maneuver around the town in these cavalry movements, these military cavalry movements, which were being used to attack and drive people before them. They would attack towns in perfect silence and whistle. They would whistle at each other, and different maneuvers were executed by whistling. They were professional.
Yeah.
And the 1870s are actually, the Reconstruction's one of the most scary and depressing periods of American history, because you had all these incredibly violentized, trained soldiers everywhere, whose youths had been spent in the service of violence, and who were really good at blowing up trains.
Oh.
And I mean, this is where Jesse James came from. This is where the Rowan County War came from. This is where the Hatfields and McCoys came from. The Hatfields and McCoys were Civil War veterans. That's why they were so darn good at shooting at each other and torturing each other and stuff like that, because they had practice.
Yeah.
So these people were scared of the Ku Klux Klan, the most terrifying incarnation of the Ku Klux Klan, who were a military force, literally a military force. I'm mostly looking at this as a defense against election fraud. So I think it's very unlikely that we'll be able to prove that anybody could die because of election fraud. Now, I do think that our data culture gives us the ability to quantify exactly how much a political candidate has been damaged by certain actions simply by looking at their vote totals. We actually have, if somebody is a politician or a political candidate, they are a representative of X number of people, and that X number of people after the election is the number of people that voted for them. If a political party or anybody acting under color of law deprives a candidate of their rights, for example, refusing to let Tulsi Gabbard in an official debate, they are disenfranchising all the people behind them. So that's why I'm looking at this. I think you'll be able to very easily prove Tulsi Gabbard would have gotten X many votes if they had done this, and she would not have gotten it, since she has been deprived of X many votes because of this deplatforming. You can sue, and civil damages are part of this. You could actually, although it's cynical, you could just say something like, if I have $1 million campaign and it gets me 1 million voters, that's $1 a voter. If in 2016 I run $1 million campaign and I get 1 million voters, and then in 2020 I'm deplatformed by people acting under the color of law, and I spend $1 million, and now I only get 200,000 voters, you are depriving me of $1 a voter, $800,000. I could sue for. I'm totally.
I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, interesting idea.
So you could. I mean, like, the point is, you can be able to quantify damages. There's a metric now where there wasn't when they were doing this. And also, the other thing I want to mention here is that if someone is killed by the KKK under Section 6, you can sue for $5,000. That's what a human life was considered to be worth in 1871 dollars. It was about $5,000. And that's actually pretty accurate to their economy at the time. So when they put forth these criminal provisions in Section 2, saying that you can be fined $500 to $5,000, what they're saying is that you can be fined an amount of money equal to the amount of money an ordinary person would make in their entire life. I just hit my microphone with my finger again. It makes a really cool noise. But anyway, so $5,000 is an entire life's worth of money at this time. So yeah, I think you're right. I think they were incredibly serious. I think this is a dead serious bill.
Yeah.
Like, they aren't joking at any point in this. Section 7, that nothing herein contained shall be construed to supersede or repeal any former act or law, except so far as the same may be repugnant thereto. And any offenses heretofore committed against the tenor of any former act shall be prosecuted, and any proceeding already commenced for the prosecution thereof shall be continued and completed, the same as if this act had not been passed, except so far as the provisions of this act may go to sustain and validate such proceedings. That's just boilerplate, right? But
Yeah, it's saying it's not retroactive.
yeah, but that's good.
Before 1871, whatever.
I mean, I actually really like the way that bills are written, although it's difficult to read them out loud, with the endless commas. I'm sure it's easier if it's the 19th century and you're standing on a soapbox. But one of the things that I love about the law is how careful the language is and how precise they try to be.
Right.
And how they try to dot every I and cross every T. I mean, a bill that's lasted 150 years is a fairly good bill. And although there's things in here that really bother me and things that I am not completely sure are still in the law, on the whole, I gotta say I agree with what I read. Okay, so let's see. Now, the history of the 1871 Ku Klux Klan Act. This came in January 1871 when a Republican senator from Pennsylvania had a congressional committee to hear testimony from witnesses of Klan atrocities. And there were a lot of them. They were very upset. So they used this all through during Reconstruction to use, and they used federal troops instead of state militias, which was a big deal. And Klansmen were prosecuted in federal court, where juries were often predominantly black, because there were a lot of black people in the government immediately after the Civil War. And actually, this was an attempt to save their lives. And the Ku Klux Klan and other forces ended up driving them completely out of the government for 70 years, 80 years. Anyway, so this bill is very effective. It was very much of its time. It held on through the Reconstruction era, but it didn't hang on through the Lost Cause era, which is when Kentucky lost its way too.
What was the Lost Cause era?
The Lost Cause. Okay, so it went Civil War, Reconstruction, and then after Reconstruction, this is Reconstruction era, although technically Reconstruction had ended by this time, but Grant was still Reconstruction era. After the Reconstruction era came the Lost Cause era, where people began to romanticize the South and romanticize the Civil War. And that's when a lot of books were written that attempted to, they successfully rewrote and reframed the Civil War as a beautiful crusade to save a doomed way of life. Very pernicious, very wrong. I mean, it's just, if you wanted to pick a time in American history where people were saying and doing really wrong things, the Lost Cause era, the late 1890s. This is a very dark era of American history. People don't. I mean, I'm a student of history, and I don't really know what happened between the 1870s and the 1900s. It's very confusing. There was a huge amount of
all I
labor
remember is robber barons, labor
unrest, Harlan County War.
Right.
I mean, this is when they were logging Eastern Kentucky flat.
Yeah.
This is an era of Great Oppression, in all sorts of ways. But anyway, okay, so they then. This law, after being used very successfully for a very long time, was the root cause disappeared. The Ku Klux Klan, you always hear the Ku Klux Klan existed and then they disappeared and then they came back. This is what they're talking about. The 1871 Ku Klux Klan Act did destroy the Ku Klux Klan. And then during the Lost Cause, a very fatuous era, that's when the romanticized, the Birth of a Nation Ku Klux Klan came back. And those people were just as evil, but were not militarily trained.
Okay.
So they didn't have the brutal military efficiency of the early Klan. Anyway, so once the Ku Klux Klan disappeared for the first time, they sort of let this law fall into disrepair, it looks like. And then when the Ku Klux Klan resurged, they knew this bill was a problem, so they fought it. But, as later amended and codified as Section 1983, 42 U.S.C. 1983, which is very much the operative law now, says, every person who, under color of any statute, ordinance, regulation, custom, or usage of any state or territory, or the District of Columbia, that's in there now, subjects or causes to be subjected any citizen of the United States or any person within the jurisdiction thereof to the deprivation of rights, privileges, or immunities secured by the Constitution and laws, shall be liable to the party injured in an action at law, suit in equity, or other proper proceeding for redress, except that in any action brought against a judicial officer for an act or omission taken in such officer's judicial capacity, injunctive relief shall not be granted unless a declaratory decree was violated or declaratory relief was unavailable. For the purposes of this section, any act of Congress applicable exclusively to the District of Columbia shall be considered to be a statute of the District of Columbia. So they added in something about the District of Columbia, which is just...
Yeah. Just to clarify, it's
Yeah.
not the year 1983.
No.
It's the federal section number.
Section, yeah,
Of the
42
law.
U.S.C. Section 1983.
Right.
Which is the law of the land right now.
Yes.
No doubt about that whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Section 1983 made relief in the form of money damages available to those whose constitutional rights had been violated by a person acting under state authority. So, if the DNC is acting under state authority, and one would assume they are,
Well, I think that it's very clear that they are when they are doing something having to do with an election. When they're choosing their own DNC chair, I think a good case could be made that it's a private organization, and the government has nothing to say about whether Tom Perez should remain the chair of the DNC or not.
yeah, just like a private prison can choose their own prison director.
Right. But if they're administering an election, they're an agent of the state.
Mm-hmm.
They're acting under
Yep, they're
The
acting
color
under
of-
law.
law, and yeah. So,
Yeah, I mean, this says under color of. If I am in a polling place, running a polling booth, and
Yeah.
people are coming to me for voting, and I am being administered and overseen by the Board of Elections, and it's called an election, that is the color of...
yeah,
that's under the color of law.
that's very clear.
Yeah, there's no getting out of that one. So yeah, I mean, you're being reticent about your own case, which I respect, but like this seems to me very clear that Tulsi Gabbard can sue the DNC.
Yeah, she better marshal her evidence and get it all organized and all that before she files a lawsuit. But,
Well, just the fact. I mean, I know that it's not that they're changing the rules, because the rules for the debate aren't. One of the ways the DNC gets around this is the rules for the debate aren't set ahead of time, right? They
Right.
come up with new rules every time. So
that's
it's not
right.
like they're changing
That's
the
awfully
rules.
shady.
Yeah, totally.
We can change the law at the very last minute.
Yeah.
If we feel like it.
Well, if we never had it, we didn't change it. So
Yeah. That's shady.
yeah, it really is.
And the Kentucky Democratic Party does the same thing.
Absolutely they
They've
do.
got bylaws that supposedly
Mm-hmm.
are in effect continuously.
Mm-hmm.
But then every 4 years, they come up with procedures to choose who's going to be the delegates to go to the national convention and all. They can change those anytime.
Yeah.
And let's just fill out the picture. Their own bylaws, they violate those all the time too. They do not care what their bylaws say.
No, they don't care at all. Just out of curiosity, now, KAT I don't think is, because here in Kentucky we're having a problem with KAT putting funding or donation thresholds on participation in various almost random debates on KAT. Now, is KAT acting as a state organization?
They are. KET is a state agency.
That's true.
The Kentucky Authority for Educational Television. They've got a board of directors appointed somehow, possibly by the governor. I don't know. And they are an agency of state government.
Yeah, absolutely. So they are.
There's no question at all that they're acting under color of law all the time.
And when they aren't being, if I understand correctly, if I recall correctly, they aren't being as clever with the DNC and saying like, oh, we never had standards, we just come up with them every time. They come up with standards and then they change the standards.
Yeah, I guess in recent years, for just my own experience, they change their debate invitation criteria every year.
And sometimes, they changed it during
And
the year last time,
sometimes,
yeah.
and sometimes more than once, right?
And so to pick a more neutral example, like who's somebody who was kept out of the debates last year because of funding? John Hicks, right? Was John Hicks the Libertarian candidate? I think he was kept out of the debate because of the funding. I know that they shut down the Republican debate entirely, like they just didn't have one. So that's a little bit of a stranger case, but I just want to pick somebody. Like,
Some of the were there 4 Republicans running for what? Governor.
Yeah, there were 4. There was William Woods, who's a super nice guy. There's Bob Goforth, who's Bob Goforth. There's Matt Bevin, who's gone now.
Right.
And there's good old Ike. Okay,
So there were 4, and KET excluded some of them based on their not having raised enough money.
That's true. Yeah,
and then they canceled the whole debate, I think, because Bevin didn't want to debate. Is that the reason?
No, that's exactly what happened. They excluded William and Ike because they didn't make the funding limit.
Right. That leaves 2.
And then they canceled it completely because then Bevin said, "Well, I'm not going to debate Goforth," and so then they just canceled it completely.
Yeah.
And so the Republicans didn't even get a debate last year.
That's right.
Which I felt was very injurious to the Republicans.
Well, I think it was a disservice to the public and to the voters.
Yeah.
I don't like any of these restrictions. 4 people is not too many to have on the stage at one time.
No,
It's not like 25 people trying to get their, 30 seconds each.
I've been to KET studios. They have 4 chairs.
Right.
They're right there.
Yeah.
There's no problem whatsoever. There's no reason why they couldn't have included people. But what I'm saying here is that Section 1983, since they're KET and they're clearly operating under the color of statute, ordinance, regulation, custom, and usage of any state or territory, we're technically a commonwealth. They might slide by on that one.
No. Can't slide by.
Mr. Young does not agree. All right, so any state or territory, also us, even though we're awesome. So they deprived them and all their voters. And not all of their voters are theoretical. Like William Woods put up a lot of voters. He got a fair number of votes. I don't remember how many it was, but even though it's small in percentage terms, large numbers of Kentucky citizens had their right to have their candidate who they had chosen to speak for them speak freely on their state-owned, citizen-owned organ of broadcasting.
Now, apparently, if it's a private corporation, media corporation, they can rig elections as much as they want. They can do whatever they want.
Yeah. Oh, they can. I just want it noted that it's against the law.
But KET is a state agency.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. Yeah. So like MSNBC can do any damn thing they want to.
And they do.
I meant darn.
The darn thing. Yeah. They do. I was trying to get into debates in previous years, and I'd call up a corporate media company, TV station, and they'd say, "No, you can't come. You can't join the other candidates."
Yeah, like Fancy Farm. Like at Fancy Farm, they're saying, "Well, technically this is just a church picnic, and it's not our fault that everybody shows up." But KET cannot say that. All right. Well,
in my opinion.
Well, I think that Section 1983 agrees with you. So, Section 1983 made relief in the form of money damages available to those whose constitutional rights had been violated by a person acting under state authority, state of Kentucky. Normally, constitutional rights violations are remedied by specific performance, including injunctions by the courts. Thus, if a person's right to due process was violated by a prison guard who was said to be acting under the authority of the state, under 1983, that person could bring suit for monetary damages against the prison guard. Without 1983, that person would have to seek an injunction by the courts for the due process violation. The problem with such an action by the court is that injunctions, which instruct a party on penalty of contempt to do or not do some action, cannot apply to past harm, only future harm. Okay, so they can. So like you could only be without Section 1983. You could only tell the prison guard, "Hey, don't crack that guy's skull again."
Yeah, don't do that again.
Yeah. Okay. Well, all right. Okay. That's that. Way to go, Section 1983.
Or don't do anything like it.
Yeah. Well, I hate to. Texas. I lived in Texas for a long time. Texas labor laws are so bad that it's nearly impossible to sue your boss for discrimination. I'll pick a random ethnicity that nobody cares, that nobody's too upset about. In English, let's say that you've got a boss that you're down in Texas, and you have a boss who hates the English.
All right.
Maybe he's Andrew Jackson. Who knows? He hates English people, and he goes on and on and on and on all day about how terrible English people are and how much he hates oxtail soup. And every time he sees the Tower of London, he feels sick inside and blah, blah, blah. There's nothing you can do about that unless your boss looks at you and says, "I hate English people. By the way, you're English." So,
all right.
I enjoy having slightly stronger protections.
What is it called? A hostile work environment.
Very hard to do in Texas. Texas labor law is a nightmare. People don't realize how different the different states are. Okay, anyway, so without 1983, that person would have to seek an injunction by the courts for the due process violation. In other words, under this, you could sue them, whereas without it, you'd have to have the court say, "Well, don't ever say anything bad about the English to this specific person ever again." The problem with such an action by the court is that injunctions... Oh, I just read that. So essentially, the person would have to have an actionable cause, the constitutional violation, with no adequate remedy. Most 1983 claims are brought against prison officials by prisoners, but prisoner claims are usually dismissed as being without merit. Claims can be brought by anybody stating a proper cause of action. Circumstances changed in 1961 when the Supreme Court of the United States articulated three purposes that underlie the statute. 1, to override certain kinds of state laws. 2, to provide a remedy where state law was inadequate. And 3, to provide a federal remedy where the state remedy, though adequate in theory, was not available in practice.
That's interesting.
Yeah. I'm looking at this completely for election law purposes, and that seems to me to go right to it. Now, the statute stands as one of the most powerful authorities with which state and federal courts may protect those whose rights are deprived. Section 1983 of the 1871 Civil Rights Act provides a way individuals can sue for redress. I think this part's miswritten. When their federally protected rights are violated, like the First Amendment rights and the Due Process Clause and the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. Section 1983 can be used to redress violated rights based on the federal Constitution and federal statutes, such as the prohibition of public sector employment discrimination based on race, color, national origin, sex, and religion. So really, this law is how everybody's suing on civil rights grounds.
Yeah, I mean, you can say the Kentucky Constitution has a Bill of Rights very similar to the federal one, but
even better.
I'm not sure you'd get anywhere.
Well,
I don't know.
No, you wouldn't get anywhere because the law has very little to do with what the courts do. But still, one lives in hope. And here's the very last bit, and it's 6:46, so we got to wrap it up anyway. In some jurisdictions, 1983 has been applied directly to private employers when litigants have sued under this act. It can also be applied in virtually all jurisdictions in a more indirect manner to private employers if they are acting under state or federal authority. For example, if an additional private security company is hired by the police for an event and given authority by the police, and during the event the security company violates a participant's First Amendment right, they can be sued under 1983, Section 1983.
That's also very interesting.
Yeah, that means that it doesn't matter if they're... I mean, as long as these people are being hired by the state to administer elections, or to administer things that happen to look exactly like elections.
Right, or to administer a public, a public event in the town square.
Okay, well... that discussion, that was very interesting. It also took the entire show,
right,
which I wasn't expecting. So this is 88.1 WRFL, all the way to the left. I'm going to play a couple promos, and then we will leave you with our closing thoughts. Here's one for J. Galt Eyewear. How ironic. So that was Cindy, a local band, and they are also playing in exactly 1 week and 12 hours at Cosmic Charlie's. Before that was Red Mask with their song Life is a Cabaret. Life is a Cabaret. It was pretty short. I like that. Before that was Wolf Parade with As Kind as You Can off of Thin Mind, which is not their best album. I'm sorry, Wolf Parade, if you're listening. Thank you for listening to our show and our extremely long digression on section 42 or section 183 of part 42 of the American Civil Rights Code. That was fun and boring. I had a great time. Here comes the next show. I'm going to play another song for you before it goes. This is 88.1 WRFL all the way to the left, and I would like to remind you to wash your hands because people are freaking out about this coronavirus stuff, and they'll freak out less if your hands are clean. So the first case of the novel coronavirus, known scientifically as COVID-19, has been detected in Lexington on March 6th. I'm supposed to act terribly worried about this. I'm sorry. The respiratory disease was first discovered in the Wuhan province in China and has further spread throughout the globe. However, there is a very slim chance of getting sick for college-age students, so this is nothing to panic about, in spite of the fact that you hear about it 40 times a day in literally every media, telling you over and over again to not panic. It's hard to not panic when somebody's telling you 40 times a day to not panic, but seriously, don't panic. The most important part is washing your hands. Sneeze in your elbow or down your shirt, and wash your hands regularly with warm water and soap for at least 30 seconds, or 20 seconds is really what they're really advising is 20 seconds, but, everybody always adds 10 seconds. Anytime there's a number, people add to it. It's human nature. Don't go to class if you feel sick, right? Not very hard. Schedule an appointment at the UK Student Health Services, which can be reached by clicking the Student Health tab on your My UK portal. Practicing good hygiene not only prevents you from getting sick, but also prevents the spread of communicable diseases to fellow students. Up-to-date information regarding UK's response plan and other important information is available at www.uky.edu/coronavirus. If you have any questions or concerns, please call University Health Service at 859-323-5823. And I know somebody tells you this 90 times a day, but seriously, don't panic about coronavirus. People are freaking out about nothing. Here you go. Here's one last song.